The front door of the two-story brick house in suburban Cleveland slammed with a force that rattled the family photos on the hallway wall. "Get out and don't ever come back if this is the life you choose," roared Mark Thompson, his face flushed with rage as he pointed straight at his son James. James, 25 years old, stood frozen in the entryway, his hands still linked with Benjamin's, the man he had loved quietly for the past 2 years. It had happened so fast. Mark had come home early from the construction site and walked right into the kitchen where James and Benjamin were laughing over coffee and sharing a quick kiss. The sight had broken something in Mark, the conservative father who had coached Little League, raised his boy on football Sundays in church pews, and built his identity around providing a traditional American life. Now that image lay shattered on the linoleum floor. James felt his chest tighten, the years of careful hiding crashing down all at once. He had always known this moment might come. The nights he lay awake wondering if his love for Benjamin made him broken or wrong, the pressure from his father's constant comments about settling down with a nice girl one day. Benjamin, 27, a high school history teacher with kind brown eyes and a calm presence, squeezed James' hand gently. "Sir, this isn't a choice," James said, his voice steady but cracking at the edges. "This is who I am." Mark laughed bitterly, a harsh sound that echoed through the house. "Who you are," he repeated. "I didn't raise a son to throw away everything I worked for on some lifestyle." Lisa, James' mother, stepped forward from the living room, her hands twisting the dish towel. She held her eyes already glistening. "Mark, please, let's sit down and talk this through," she pleaded, but Mark waved her off, his broad shoulders rigid with years of unspoken expectations. James felt the familiar knot of identity crisis twist tighter inside him, the internal voice that had whispered doubt since high school when he first realized his feelings for boys were not just a phase. He remembered hiding magazines under his bed, avoiding locker room talk, and forcing smiles at family gatherings when aunts asked about girlfriends. Benjamin had been the first person to make him feel seen, not broken, the day they met at a community pride event 2 years earlier, where Benjamin was volunteering as a mentor. Their connection had grown slowly through coffee dates, late-night talks, and shared dreams of a simple life together. Now, as Mark continued his tirade about sin and disappointment, James' mind raced with the consequences: losing the family home, the weekly dinners, the approval he had chased his whole life. "I won't watch you ruin yourself," Mark continued, his voice rising. "Pack your things and go." James swallowed hard, glancing at Benjamin, who nodded, once a silent promise of support. "Fine," James replied quietly, turning to grab his jacket from the hook. The three of them stood in heavy silence for a moment, Lisa reaching out but stopping short as Mark crossed his arms. As James and Benjamin stepped out into the crisp Ohio evening, the door clicked shut behind them with finality. The drive to Benjamin's downtown apartment was quiet at first, the Cleveland skyline glowing in the distance like a beacon of possibility and uncertainty. James stared out the window, his mind replaying every childhood memory where his father had pushed him to be tough, to be the man of the house. Benjamin kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on James' knee. "It's going to hurt for a while," he said softly, "but we face it together." James nodded, tears finally spilling as the weight of the confrontation settled in. Back at the house, Mark paced the living room, muttering to himself, while Lisa sat on the couch, her heart torn between her husband and her son. The family that had seemed unbreakable that morning now stood divided, and James' journey towards self-acceptance had only just begun, with the first painful step away from the only home he had ever known. That night in the apartment, Benjamin made tea and listened as James unpacked years of suppressed emotions, the fear, the shame, the quiet pride he was beginning to feel. They talked until the early hours, James describing the internal battles, the moments he had almost told his parents, but backed out, the joy he felt when Benjamin first said, "I love you." Benjamin shared his own coming-out story from a more accepting family in California, how it had shaped his patience and strength. By dawn, James felt a small spark of resolve amid the pain. He was not alone, and that truth would carry him forward. The next morning, Mark called his brother to vent, refusing to let Lisa reach out to James, yet the crack in the family foundation had widened, and the road to healing or further fracture stretched ahead, filled with unknown choices and consequences. James spent the day in the apartment, replaying the scene, analyzing every word his father had said, wondering if love for Benjamin was worth the sacrifice of family ties. Benjamin gave him space but stayed close, offering quiet reassurance through small gestures like cooking breakfast and holding him when the tears returned. Meanwhile, in the suburbs, Lisa secretly texted James a simple "I love you" message that brought fresh emotion to his eyes. The first file of their new chapter was written in tears and tentative hope. The emotional journey of two men navigating love against the backdrop of family rejection had officially started with a bang that echoed through their lives. James woke to the soft hum of traffic outside Benjamin's apartment window, his body heavy with the exhaustion of a sleepless night. The confrontation with his father replayed in vivid detail the anger, the rejection, the way Mark had looked at him like a stranger. Benjamin was already up making coffee in the small kitchen, the aroma filling the modest one-bedroom space that overlooked the Cuyahoga River. "You don't have to pretend, it's okay," James said, sitting up on the couch where he had crashed. Benjamin turned with a gentle smile, handing him a mug. "I'm not pretending, but I'm here for the real stuff too, the doubt, the anger, the moments you question everything." James sipped the coffee, feeling the warmth spread, but it did little to ease the internal storm. He had always carried the weight of his father's expectations, the pressure to follow in the family trade, to marry, to have kids the way Mark and Lisa had. Being gay had felt like a betrayal of that legacy, a secret he guarded through college and into his job as a graphic designer. Now exposed, the crisis of identity hit harder than ever. Was he strong enough to stand without his family's approval? Benjamin sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "Remember when we first met at that volunteering event?" he said. "You were so nervous about being seen with another guy." James nodded, a small smile breaking through. "You made it feel safe." Their relationship had been built on quiet moments like weekend hikes in the Metro Park, shared books, and late dinners where they talked about everything from politics to dreams of owning a small house someday. But now the outside world, the family world, pressed in. Benjamin's phone buzzed with a text from a mutual friend who had heard rumors, but he ignored it, focusing on James. Across town in the family home, Mark sat at the kitchen table, staring at his untouched breakfast, Lisa hovering nearby. "I can't just pretend this isn't happening," she said softly. "He's our son, Mark." Mark slammed his fist on the table. "He chose this life, Lisa. I taught him better." The argument escalated, Mark recounting his own upbringing in a strict household where such things were never discussed, Lisa countering with stories of friends whose kids had come out and thrived. James, meanwhile, paced the apartment, his mind drifting to childhood memories, fishing trips with his dad where Mark had drilled lessons about being a real man. Those moments now felt tainted. Benjamin suggested a walk to clear his head, and they strolled along the river path, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, the cool air sharpening their thoughts. James opened up about the shame he had carried, the times he dated girls in high school, to fit in the relief when he met Benjamin and finally felt authentic. Benjamin listened without judgment, sharing his own struggles with societal prejudice at work where colleagues sometimes made offhand comments. Their bond deepened in that vulnerability, the love not just romantic but a partnership forged in understanding. Back at the house, Lisa tried calling James, but it went to voicemail, leaving her with a heavy heart. Mark retreated to the garage, tinkering with tools to avoid the conversation, but his mind raced with doubts he refused to voice. The misunderstanding between father and son grew, the betrayal James felt at being cast out, the anger Mark harbored at what he saw as a failure in his parenting. That evening, James and Benjamin cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish, their movements synchronized in the small kitchen, offering a glimpse of normalcy amid the chaos. James felt a flicker of gratitude for Benjamin, the steady presence that made the pain bearable. Yet the internal conflict raged on, questions of worth, family loyalty, and self-acceptance swirling like the river outside. They watched a movie, later cuddled on the couch, but James' mind wandered to what his mother was thinking, if his father would ever soften. The tension in the family home mounted as Mark avoided Lisa, turning to old friends for validation, while she prayed for reconciliation. James received a short text from his sister, who lived out of state, expressing support, but only highlighted the divide. As night fell in the apartment, Benjamin held James close, whispering words of encouragement about growth through adversity. James whispered back, "I don't know who I am without their approval." Benjamin replied, "You're the man I love, and that's enough to start with." The emotional layers unfolded slowly, the crisis building as James confronted not just external rejection, but the deep-seated doubts within himself, the journey of two men intertwined with family fractures gaining momentum toward greater understanding or deeper pain. The days blurred into a routine of quiet support in the apartment, James throwing himself into freelance design projects to distract from the ache in his chest. Benjamin returned from teaching each afternoon with stories from his classroom, the kids who reminded him why he fought for acceptance every day. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker, James opened up about the betrayal he felt, not just from his father, but from the version of himself he had performed for years. "I spent so much energy hiding Benjamin," he said, the wind ruffling his hair. "Pretending at family barbecues, laughing at jokes that made me cringe inside." Benjamin nodded, his arm around James' shoulders. That's the weight we carry until we don't. Their conversation turned to future plans, perhaps moving to a bigger place together, building a chosen family. But the shadow of Mark's rejection loomed. James' internal monologue raged with self-doubt, the voice that echoed his father's words, questioning if his love was selfish, if it destroyed the family unit. Benjamin shared stories of his own growth from a conservative extended family in California, where coming out had been met with mixed reactions but eventual love. The contrast highlighted the different worlds they came from, yet their bond bridged them. Meanwhile, Mark had taken a day off work, pacing the backyard, his mind replaying the kitchen, seeing the kiss that shattered his worldview. Lisa tried again over dinner. "He's still our boy," she said. Mark pushed his plate away. "I can't accept it, Lisa. It's against everything I believe." The misunderstanding deepened, Mark seeing James' choice as a personal attack, Lisa seeing it as an opportunity for growth. James received a call from his grandfather, Henry, the family patriarch who lived in a small house nearby. The old man, voice warm on the phone, asked how he was doing without prying too much, planting a seed of hope. James felt a surge of emotion. The grandfather, who had always been quiet but kind, now a potential lifeline. The next weekend, James and Benjamin drove to a local park for a hike, the fresh air helping James process the crisis. They talked about societal pressures, the looks they sometimes got in public, the strength found in each other. James admitted the fear of losing his mother, too, the woman who had bandaged his knees and cheered at his games. Benjamin reassured him love doesn't have an expiration date. Back home, Mark found an old photo album, flipping through pictures of James as a boy, his face softening momentarily before hardening again. The internal conflict for Mark began the first cracks in his rigid beliefs. Lisa secretly met James for coffee at a neutral cafe, the hug they shared tearful and healing in its simplicity. She promised to keep trying with Mark. The file of emotional development continued, James beginning to see his identity not as a flaw, but as part of his strength, Benjamin, his anchor through the storm. Misunderstandings with friends who heard rumors added layers, some supportive, some distant, highlighting the broader societal context. James journaled late at night, pouring out thoughts on sacrifice and choice, the psychological consequences of rejection, weighing heavy, yet the love with Benjamin lighting the path forward. The tension built slowly, the family on the brink of bigger confrontations as James grew more resolute in his truth. Henry, the 78-year-old grandfather, arrived unannounced at the apartment, one afternoon, his cane tapping the hallway floor. James opened the door, surprised but relieved to see the familiar, weathered face. "Come in, Grandpa," he said, leading him to the living room where Benjamin stood politely. Henry sat slowly, his eyes kind as he looked at the two young men. "I heard what happened with your father," he said directly. James felt exposed, but Henry continued, "I didn't come to judge. I came to listen." The conversation unfolded, Henry sharing stories from his youth, the war years, the pressures of his era. Benjamin made tea, listening respectfully as James opened up about the pain, the growth, the love he shared. Henry nodded thoughtfully, his presence a calm contrast to Mark's rage. Meanwhile, Mark had grown more isolated at home, arguing with Lisa over her secret meeting with James, the betrayal he felt extending to his wife. The family dynamics shifted, Lisa torn between loyalty to her husband and love for her son. James and Benjamin took Henry for a walk in the park, the old man moving slowly but steadily. He hinted at understanding more than he let on without revealing too much, building a bridge. James felt a flicker of hope, the grandfather offering wisdom that challenged his doubts. The misunderstandings between generations surfaced, Henry gently questioning Mark's stance without criticizing. Back at the house, Mark received a call from Henry suggesting a family meeting, but Mark refused, hanging up in frustration. The pressure mounted, James grappling with the decision to cut ties or fight for reconciliation, the psychological toll manifesting in restless nights. Benjamin supported him through it, all their relationship deepening with shared vulnerabilities. Henry left with a promise to stay in touch, his subtle intervention planting seeds of change. The emotional journey progressed, James beginning to forgive himself for the pain caused, the growth evident in his clearer sense of self. Societal prejudices appeared in a work email. James received a subtle bias from a client, but he handled it with newfound confidence thanks to Benjamin. The file closed with the family tension rising toward a breaking point, Henry's quiet support contrasting Mark's loud rejection, setting the stage for the pivotal moment ahead. The family gathered at the old house for what Lisa hoped would be a calm dinner, but tension filled the air from the moment James and Benjamin arrived at Henry's invitation. Mark sat at the head of the table, his jaw set, refusing to look at his son. Conversation started, stilted, Lisa serving roast beef, the clink of forks loud in the silence. Then Mark could hold it no longer. "This isn't right," he said, pointing at James and Benjamin. "You bringing him here makes it worse." James felt the familiar sting, but before he could respond, Henry stood up slowly, his chair scraping the floor. "Enough, Mark," the old man said, his voice strong and clear for his age. The room fell silent, everyone turning to him. "I have lived with secrets longer than you have been alive," Henry continued. "I lost my best friend in the war, a man I loved more than I ever admitted to anyone. I chose the safe path, married your grandmother, raised your father, but I regretted it every day I stayed silent." The revelation hit like a thunderclap, Mark staring open-mouthed, Lisa gasping, James and Benjamin exchanging shocked glances. Henry's action was bold. He pulled out an old faded photo from his wallet showing two young men in uniform, arms around each other. "This is the truth I hid," he said, "and I won't hide anymore. If you reject James, you reject the legacy I failed to protect. I'm giving James and Benjamin the family cabin up north and my savings to start their life. If you can't accept that, Mark, then you can explain it to your mother in heaven." The family sat speechless, the unexpected stand from the quiet patriarch shifting the power dynamic entirely. Mark sputtered, but no words came, the shock rendering him mute. James felt tears, the validation from his grandfather, healing deep wounds. Benjamin placed a hand on James' arm, the moment charged with emotion. Henry sat back down, the weight of his confession lifting as he looked at his grandson with pride. The confrontation escalated briefly, Mark storming out to the backyard, but the revelation had changed everything, the psychological consequences rippling through each person. James embraced his grandfather, the bond strengthened in that instant of courage. The climax peaked with Henry's sacrifice, exposing his own identity struggles to save his grandson from the same fate. The family forever altered in that dining room under the warm chandelier light. In the days following the dinner, Mark avoided everyone, retreating into work and silenced the revelation from his father, forcing him to confront his own upbringing, the rigid beliefs passed down. Lisa reached out to James more openly, the mother-son relationship mending slowly over phone calls. James and Benjamin visited the cabin Henry had given them, the rustic place by the lake, offering space for reflection. James processed the growth the way his grandfather's courage had mirrored his own journey from fear to acceptance. Benjamin stood by him through flashbacks of doubt, helping him see the strength in vulnerability. Misunderstandings arose when a family friend called Mark to gossip, but Henry stepped in again, his bold action inspiring quiet conversations. James met with his sister via video, the family ties reconnecting piece by piece. The emotional healing began, Mark taking long walks alone, questioning his reaction, the sacrifice Henry made weighing on him. James felt his identity solidify, not defined by rejection, but by the love he chose. Benjamin and James planned a small future together, the relationship thriving amid the family evolution. Henry visited, often sharing more stories, the multi-generational bonds deepening. The aftermath of the confrontation brought reflection, betrayal, turning to understanding, the characters evolving through choices and their consequences. Mark finally sat down with Henry in the backyard, the conversation long and raw, the father admitting his fear of change, the grandfather sharing the pain of a lifetime in the closet. James and Benjamin joined later, the group talk filled with tears and tentative forgiveness. Lisa facilitated the healing, misunderstandings cleared as Mark expressed his love beneath the anger. James shared his internal growth, the crisis that had forged resilience. The family sacrificed pride for connection, Henry's revelation the catalyst for broader acceptance. Societal pressures discussed openly, the men supporting each other in their truths. The journey toward wholeness accelerated, James and Benjamin stronger, their love a model for the family. The family dinner months later felt different, the table full with laughter and stories, James and Benjamin seated beside Mark, who had slowly opened his heart. Henry watched with quiet satisfaction, his shocking revelation having sparked the change. The bonds were formed through effort and empathy, the emotional arcs complete, James fully embracing his identity, Benjamin, his partner in every sense, Mark learning that love transcended his old views. As the evening wound down with coffee on the porch, James looked at his family, the journey from rejection to unity, a testament to courage and growth. True or false, a parent's love should always override their personal beliefs and prejudices when it comes to their child's happiness and identity.